All right. So here with my friend Lisa Kilgour, and we were just chatting, and it has been, I think, 15 years since we had been working together all that time ago in Kelowna, British Columbia. Lisa's a holistic nutritionist. And in the time since we were working together there, we worked together at Happily Holistic when that was a place. And since then, I've moved to Costa Rica and opened the GEMS College of Energy Medicine. You've moved to the Silicon Valley and have become a TEDx speaker and a published author. And in this last little while of looking at some of the videos and things that we've been posting online, I was reminded about how much overlap there is in our work and our viewpoints on nutrition for the whole body, right? Body, mind, spirit kind of nutrition. And just to kind of recap a little bit of what we were saying before, as I'm in my 40s and noticing perimenopausal kinds of changes, a lot of my clients and friends are in their 40s and 50s and are noticing a lot of those changes. And there's so much dietary advice that is coming at me. The algorithm knows how old I am. I am absolutely being bombarded by things that are like, are you eating enough protein? And I feel like it would be very helpful for us to have a little conversation and share it with people about ways of kind of taking care of your body and your mental health and your emotional health and your sleep and all of those things as we're navigating these big life changes. So I'm sorry, that was a long preamble, but hey, I'm glad to talk to you.
This is great. Yeah, and I'm 47, so I've got a few more years on you into the perimenopause journey. But yes, my all of my clients are in here too, and my the algorithm very definitely knows how old I am, and they have like since when as soon as I turned 40, the algorithm started sending me very different things.
Yeah. My favorite are the ones that are like, are you putting on a lot of weight? Are you experiencing this cortisol belly? And I'm like, can you see me? What are we talking about here? It's very upsetting. Like,
I spent my first 2 years of my 40s hiding every single dieting ad because they're so well written that they were even talking to me. And I'm like, this is what I do all day. I know none of this works. And still, like, your copywriting is so fantastic that it took years before I stopped. I don't get dieting ads now, but like years and years, like Meta tried very hard to pull me into the dieting culture. And so, like, for the average person, it feels so overwhelming because this is what I've noticed over and over and over again is that what we know is that perimenopause, the hormone shift of perimenopause, is extraordinarily stressful on the body. And our lives in our 40s and 50s are often very stressful in this life. And so all of what the body starts doing is getting really loud and intolerant because it's like, I got a lot I'm already handling. Why are you stressing me out? And a lot of the food advice that's out there adds more stress to the body. So fasting is a stressor. Low carb diets are a stressor. And so to add that in when you're already stressed out, this is why your body doesn't respond to it well. This is why it's unsustainable. And this is why your body's like, give me all the carbs you can possibly imagine once you've gone off those restrictions. It's just a normal human thing. And what we have to understand is that a perimenopausal body is basically out of fashion when it comes to what's in fashion in the food world. So everything that we're talking about, that's you see saying this is a miracle thing, was tested on men and does not work mostly on women, but especially on women over 40. That's the simplest way I can put it.
I've been saying that too, because I mean, what's crazy is that we're going through a lot of the same kind of changes as you do in puberty, right? As in, like, we're seeing a total shift in estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, monthly cycles, all of those things. But when you go through it in puberty, the stakes are low, right? Like, the worst thing that's going to happen is you say something stupid or embarrassing at lunch. Like, it's not a big deal. Whereas when you're going through those things at this age where we're in relationships, we have children, we run companies, we are doing things that are important. There are high stakes. I can't have a complete brain freeze in the middle of a class or in the middle of a big presentation, right? I can't just freak out and lose my emotional groundedness. on my kids or on my clients, right? So the stakes are high, and we still have to navigate this complete shift in body chemistry. And that obviously is
Absolutely.
stressful. Yeah.
Absolutely. And everybody in our culture understands when they see a teenager that teenager is going through some stuff. And that if something happens, it's like, yeah, yeah, I've been there. It's terrible. Because every human went through the teenage phase, but half the population goes through this perimenopausal change. It has not been studied. And so, like, what I'm seeing in the last 2 years is an absolute radical shift on the conversation around perimenopause. And I think it's absolutely important for the whole culture to understand what we're going through, because then if there is an outburst, because it's almost inevitable, then it's like, okay, you know what? Like, she's done a really good job at holding herself together in the midst of all of this. Like, but like, it is a big deal. And what's amazing is how it's a new concept to even call it a big deal. It's just like, it just blows my mind how little it's talked about and studied. And when I type perimenopause into Word, it still says it's not a word.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a real thing here for a second. Um, I've been talking a lot about cortisol to people lately because I feel like cortisol's become kind of like an evil. Like we were blaming everything on cortisol now. It's like your face is puffy because of cortisol, and you're not sleeping because of cortisol, and you're fat because of cortisol, and all of those things. And I'm having a very difficult time sometimes actually explaining to my clients that cortisol, first of all, is a good thing. It's actually more of a relax hormone than a stress hormone, but we don't think of it that way. That it is an anti-inflammatory, right? What do you think about all of these, like the cortisol diets? You've heard about the term of cortisol diet. I would love to get your take on that.
I think what we always forget, we always try to simplify things, and it makes sense. We're taking in information in 2 minute hits, so it makes sense that it has to be really simple. And instead, we like, cortisol is allowing us to talk to each other right now. Cortisol is allowing enough blood to hit my head so we can actually talk to each other. When you have no cortisol or very, very low cortisol, you're bedridden. And so it's really important to thank your cortisol every single day. And there are both this hormonal change, our lifestyle, but then there's also these little things that we do every day that can just make cortisol sit a little higher. And I've yet to see a cortisol diet actually help balance cortisol, because cortisol, like a female body in your 40s, requires carbohydrates at every single meal to balance your hormones and to keep your cortisol balanced. And most of them are like, oh, your cortisol belly needs lower blood sugar, let's take out the carbs. It's like, well, then you're going to scream, your body's going to scream for them every night. So instead of being potatoes and sweet potatoes through the day, they become potato chips and candy and sugar at night, because the body will always win. It will always get what it wants. It will take a time when you're absolutely exhausted and overwhelmed to say, I am so desperate for energy. I know you know where the potato chips are. Can I talk you into this, please? And it will get more and more demanding the more and more restrictive you are. And when we just create some balance, when we find a balance, a way of eating that our body likes, and in perimenopause, that's easier because our body is so loud that when we find that balance, we find our sleep is better and our concentration is better and our hormone fluctuations are better. And especially in the early years of perimenopause, it can keep your progesterone, estrogen a little bit better balance, so your symptoms aren't so loud. And that hopefully will find its way to be a better balance in our 50s as well. But because it's not studied, I can only see what's happening right now. And so I can look at my clients. I haven't been able to follow them for a decade to see how does these changes help for the whole time. But it's hopeful that if we can keep a better balance in our early years of perimenopause, it will help with the later years as well.
So you're saying low glycemic carbohydrates, but at every meal, rather than trying to not spike your, because everyone's saying you don't want to spike your blood sugar, and I
Yeah.
agree. But
Yeah.
there's ways of eating carbohydrates that are not spiking your blood sugar.
Exactly. Whole food, starchy carbs with fiber. So like making sure, like if that food still has the fiber in it, it will be digesting really slowly, and so that way you'll get the steady set of energy which your body desperately wants. If instead you take them out and you eat chicken and salads all the time, you will be cold, miserable, and your cortisol will actually sit higher because of the stress of not having an easy access to glucose all the time. What are you finding when you're working like energetically, like with Touch for Health and all of the things that you do in the body of a perimenopausal person?
I mean, definitely there is all of this stress on every level, right? Like we are talking about a lot of biochemistry and also looking at how diet and lifestyle support or do not support that. Um, but I was just in this health summit like last week, and I was talking about this, and I was saying that the number one thing I'm telling women to do, not because I set out that way, but because it's just what I keep seeing over and over again, is to balance their adrenals. And it's like as soon as you balance the adrenals, we are seeing just all of those symptoms of perimenopause get so much better. And now when I'm saying balance the adrenals, I'm usually talking more about like adaptogenic herbs and B vitamins and sometimes glandular support and those sorts of things, magnesium, like all the stuff that we know. Um, but I'm curious about it from the more food part too, because everyone that I talk to is coming in saying intermittent fasting, eat all the protein when you do eat, right? In your eating window, you're going to eat like, I don't know how many grams of protein people are saying they should be eating now, but it's
150. It's an enormous amount.
150?
Yes, 100. The lowest I see right now is 100, and 150 is becoming closer to the norm. And like that's wildly impossible for a digestive system to actually take in without using products and powders, which I think is
Right.
a part of the reason we're recommending it that high.
Like, especially if you are trying to do intermittent fasting and you've got like a limited eating window, what do you, I'm trying to fathom how I would get that much protein in that time. That is insane.
And not have a stomach that's screaming, you can't possibly put any more food in. I was having a conversation over dinner one time, and one of the women in the conversation was saying that her colleague will blend 3 chicken breasts in a blender with an egg, and that's how she can get to the 150, because that's 70. So like to get half her protein, she will drink it in a most disgusting blender smoothie I could ever imagine.
That's that's really gross. Okay. So
So back
I'm
to the
gonna
adrenals and food.
no, but I'm gonna ask, like, if someone is, if a woman's eating, let's say I'm drinking my chicken breast smoothie, so I'm getting 150 grams of protein. Are you seeing a reduction in symptoms? Like, what do you see actually happening in the body at that point?
I have yet to see somebody pull that off first.
Okay.
Like that, it's just so impossible. Having protein in every meal is great at balancing blood sugar and can help with that. Like, because blood sugar is a little bit more trigger happy in perimenopause. So your blood sugar will overreact at times, especially if your cortisol is high. So protein is great. But if you're going higher than say 80 grams a day, like I'm not one to count macros in general, but sometimes people want a guideline. And so I think a high protein diet is like 80 is 20 grams of protein in 3 meals and a snack. That's already hard. And any higher than that, I think about what else is it squishing out, because protein isn't overly nutrient dense. Our bodies will convert 50% of protein into glucose if it has to, but it doesn't want to. So it's a clunky system that's a bit hard on the body. It's easier than keto. Like our body really doesn't want to go into ketosis, but it really doesn't like getting glucose out of protein. So you're adding the stressor of a lack of easy access glucose, but also the lack of just general vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and polyphenols and all of that, those have to get squished out to be able to bring in this enormous amount of protein every day. And so where I really push back on the recommendations of 100 to 150 grams of protein is that alone of like, it's impossible. And like, that would be like over half of your overall diet just being protein. Like a 50 to 60% protein diet is means your nutrient dense foods, which are carbohydrates, are going to be so low that we can create nutrient deficiencies. And while this hasn't been around long enough for me to actually see that, I see that in people who follow keto. And it can take years and years and years to rebalance those nutritional deficiencies. And the body is like screaming for carbs for that whole time. So it's like, sorry.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because you said a moment ago, the body really doesn't want to go into keto. And I tell people this all the time because people talk about ketosis as being a good thing. And I'm always going, your body is literally dying at that point. Like nothing in your body thinks that's a good idea.
Yeah.
The only time I'm really in support of that kind of diet is when it is being used for a medical reason. I've seen people have really good results with it for
Mm-hmm.
specific medical conditions, treating of seizures and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like that's what it was designed for. It wasn't designed to help me get rid of a little low belly, right? Like so because this is something that I do tend to rant about a little bit, I would love to hear again your thought on this. When you're saying that it takes years to balance that out, are you seeing actual nutritional deficiencies? Like, I don't know,
What I'm
like
seeing,
medical deficiencies?
yeah, I'm seeing like their blood work is usually a little off. Women are often more insulin resistant for many years following keto. So we have to be extra careful with blood sugar, but their carb cravings are screaming because the body is like, you starved me for however long you followed it. And the microbiome is off. And I think that's the thing we like in the same circles that talk about keto and carnivore being really great. They also talk about microbiome. Well, we know there's no question that within 7 days of being on keto, your microbiome has been changed dramatically. And there is some research saying that it's a hard thing to fix. And without plant-based fibers, you starve your microbiome. And we know that that's so important for your immune system, your brain, for your neurotransmitters, for everything. I'll usually get post keto people for digestive issues. Their gut just doesn't work anymore. And they're like, what's happening? I'm like, okay, we got to fix this. But the biggest one is like the argument of this is the best thing. Like, I agree with you. Your body, like, it is the last resort. I think I'm dying place. I always bring up the study where they looked at Inuit, and Inuit live a life that the argument is always, no, the body loves ketosis and that it just naturally goes there and it's so happy. Okay, so then why are the Inuit who, when eating a traditional diet, eat a diet very close to ketosis, to keto, don't are incredibly their cells are reluctant to go into ketosis, that they are the most resistant to ketosis than people who eat carbs regularly. And so like, if this was a natural biological thing that our body enjoys, why is a group that have been eating this for generations developed a resistance to going into ketosis? And I've yet to get a good answer from any keto people about that.
The one that usually gets me is that people will tell me that they feel mentally clearer. And they'll talk about how clear they feel. And at the same time, sometimes you even hear it in their speech. It's like their brain is not usually working at 100%. I'm really sorry if I'm offending anybody right now when I say this. But for me, in my work, mental clarity is absolutely like the number one thing. And I've read enough that talks about the effects of low blood sugar on your brain, things that just show empirically that people do better on a test if you give them a glass of juice first. Like it's just really, really clear when we look at evidence that your brain needs glucose and thrives on that. And again, I'm not advocating for, spiking your blood sugar in crazy ways, but making it hard for your brain to receive the thing that fuels it doesn't seem like a great way of achieving mental clarity to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear this all the time too. So, but what I get to work with people inside their life and see the full pattern. So yes, inside keto, they feel clearer and they have more energy. That is probably the cortisol being a bit too high, and so therefore they're extra clear. Then it's also the difference between when they're not on keto, why they feel clear on keto, because when they're not on keto, their body is screaming for carbs, and so they might be almost like overly consuming refined carbohydrates. And when I mention this to them, they're often like, oh yeah, that's totally my pattern. And then not sleeping because their blood sugar's crashing, going up and down all the time. And so therefore they're tired. And it's more of the side effect of keto, not the keto in and of itself, that it's the difference between the two that makes them feel like when I'm on keto, I get clear. But like this week, this is the third time I've heard it. Like that's how common it is for women to say, I feel so much clearer when I'm on keto. It's just not sustainable. And it's like, oh, that's because it's just the difference between like the binge cycle post keto and the restriction when you're on it.
I haven't thought of that, but that really makes sense when you say it like that.
Yeah. It's like as soon as I started seeing the pattern, and now it's like when somebody says that to me, I'm like, well, does this sound familiar to you? And I explain, they're like, oh yeah. And because the cells tend to be more insulin resistant after keto, your body's overreacting to those refined carbs. So they're feeling worse than they did when you weren't on it. Your microbiome is different. So you're feeding guys that are going to cause some brain fog as well, that you might also starve out when you go on keto. So like there's a whole picture that we have to look at. It's not as simple as keto must be good for me because I feel better on it.
Okay.
Mhm.
So can I ask you like a personal, like,
Sure.
diagnose me kind of
Yeah.
question here? Um, so one thing that I've really noticed in this last couple of years is I wake up in the morning and my belly looks a certain way,
Mhm.
right? It's pretty flat. I mean, there's, a little bit there from having the kids and that sort of thing, but it's pretty flat. The second I eat anything, and it doesn't matter what it is, literally anything, fruit, eggs, whatever. Second I eat anything, I get a little bloat.
Mhm.
And then that doesn't go away through the day, whether I'm eating or not. And if I am continuing to eat, it's like it gets more in the evening to the point where, like, sometimes I feel like I basically look like I'm a few months pregnant.
Mhm.
And with my muscle testing, I keep coming up that there's nothing actually wrong. Like if I'm challenging my enzymes, I'm challenging my microbiome, I'm asking, am I eating something I shouldn't be? I'm not coming up with anything. So I'm curious from a nutrition brain,
Mhm.
what would you look at for something like that?
I love, a lot of people have this problem, and I love because I
Yeah.
can ask you the question. I can like, because you're so brilliant at the muscle testing and figuring things out, it's like I can ask you questions. So um it, there's two big reasons, and so what I have to do is experiment with my clients to figure out which one it is. You can muscle test, so this is really great. So one option is when your estrogen starts to decline, your gallbladder the bile gets less flowy, it gets stickier, and a lot of gallbladder problems start happening in your 40s. And that gallbladder lack of flow can lead to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where you have too much bacteria growing in your small intestine. And that's always when you get like pregnancy looking bloat, it's often a small intestinal problem because there's just more tubing there to pop your stomach out than a colon, than bloating in your colon. And so I would, if you haven't already, test your gallbladder and see how that's working. And if that's seeming okay, the other option is water retention, which through both the hormone balance and the just the overall cortisol balance, water, it's very, very easy for the body to hold on to water. Some of that is like electrolyte imbalance, some of that is nutrient imbalance, and some of that's like there's just so many things that get so many factors of water retention that get louder in perimenopause. The way that I have my clients see which one is it air or water, is do you gain weight Like, does the, and I hate using scales. This is only if your brain can allow you to look at numbers non-judgmentally. If it doesn't feel that way, I do not want somebody who doesn't want to live with a scale buy a scale for this. But if they have a scale and they can do it without it being a self-worth problem, because we as women can attach a number of that's just showing gravity to our self-worth, and that's real, and I always want to respect that. But if you feel that you could be comfortable with that and you have a scale, weigh yourself when you wake up, and then weigh yourself when it starts getting puffy, and are you going up in weight? And if you're going up in weight, that's water. That's it. It's the easiest one to fix. And sometimes it's an electrolyte imbalance. Like for you, I know you're a big salt craver. It could be a balance of salt and potassium. You could test your body, see what it is. B6 is another common deficiency that can lead to water retention. And then histamine is another one. I'm a massive water retainer. I can gain 10 pounds in a day. I can look 3 months pregnant by the end of the day, just because my body is out of balance and is holding on to water. If you don't gain weight, then it's an air thing, and that's more small intestinal.
Interesting. So I would think that my gallbladder is okay because I don't seem to have an issue with metabolizing fats, and I do the things like I drink my black coffee in the morning and I drink like apple cider vinegar and water in the morning.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or
That
lemon
helps.
juice, whatever I have,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it very well could be a water retention thing. I don't own a
Yeah.
scale. I
Yeah, that's
never
fine. Yeah.
have, just
Good.
for my
That's
own
good.
mental well-being.
Yeah. So I would work on it as water,
Yeah.
maybe doing some muscle testing to see if your body, like what it is. Also, this is a gallbladder symptom that happens before any other gallbladder symptom. So this is usually the very, very, very first one. And so it's still worth, like, because you can, just doing some investigation in your gallbladder. What you're doing is very protective for your gallbladder. You're doing all the things to keep it going. It's just like, depending on where your hormone balance is, there still could be some stodginess in your gallbladder.
So what do you normally suggest to people when it is a small intestine bacterial overgrowth?
Mm-hmm. So I'll do some questioning to see if it's coming up from the colon or down from the stomach. So if I'll look at, how is your stomach strong enough? Are you making enough acid? How is your gallbladder doing? If you get bloated when you eat cruciferous vegetables, if you already know like you don't like fatty foods, then it's like, okay, that's a screaming gallbladder problem. And if those both sound good, then your ileocecal valve, which is the valve from the small intestine to the colon, which again you could test for and then fix. I need you around me. I have a bunch of ileocecal valves that need fixing. Then the bacteria can come up in there. If we don't get to the core of the problem, we don't solve the problem, because you can take an antimicrobial and it just keeps getting like that. You keep getting reseeded with it. So once we find the problem, often the body fixes itself, and if not, we can add an antimicrobial to kill off whatever's in there, and often like it solves the problem. So I usually use oregano oil, and it can be very effective.
Nice. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to pick your brain on that one because, I've heard this is a complaint that I've also heard from a lot of my clients, and sometimes it's a very simple thing like, well, your body is not tolerating this food well. And as soon
Mm-hmm.
as we're able to, get off gluten or whatever it is, then it's fine. But I'm like, I don't think I'm eating anything I shouldn't
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah. And that's the perimenopausal body. It gets really loud. So you get this giant symptom for something that's really small. It's not like it used to be 10 years ago. You would have to really abuse your body to get the symptom. And now it's like, I have done nothing wrong. I just drank water. Why are you doing this? And that's the perimenopausal body saying, I got enough on my plate. I can't handle this. So I'm just going to let this go.
All
I have a
right.
question for you. A common problem, both in my body, but also in a lot of people that I work with, is that 4 a.m. wake up. And like, there's many in my world, nutritionally, there's many ways to help solve the waking up at 4 a.m., which is just such a chronic perimenopausal problem. What have you seen that, and what do you do with it?
Um, yeah, so again, also we're gonna end up bringing this back to adrenal things, which I wasn't really
Yeah,
meaning to, but for a
it's
lot
a
of
big
women, that
deal
is
for
it,
perimenopause. Yeah,
it's a cortisol thing, right?
yeah. Hmm.
So one of the things that happens again, because our body gets a little bit trigger happy and oversensitive at this point, is that little hormone fluctuations are a big deal. And we know that your cortisol levels are meant to be high in the morning because of what we were talking about before, right? It's like to give you that little bit of energy so that you can like jump up out of bed and feel like you're ready to go for the day. And if your body clock, if your circadian rhythms get knocked off a little bit, then your body can be producing that cortisol kind of the wrong time.
Hmm.
And there's different things that can trigger that. So ways that we throw our body clock off. I mean, the one that you always hear is about screens before bed, um, because it's like your brain just knows how much light it gets. It doesn't know, is that light because it's noon or is it light because I've got a phone 6 inches from my face, right? It doesn't know. It just knows it's light. And so that throws off it's our suprachiasmatic nucleus, takes in the light, and it sets up this hormone cascade. Are we making more serotonin or melatonin, right? And if we are making melatonin and valentinin and those other hormones, how much are we making? Are we going down for a nap or are we going down for the night? Right? And so when we are stressed and up late and stressing our body more with the computer and the phone and those things, it's really easy for us to kind of throw off that circadian rhythm. So it's usually where I start with people is challenging those rhythms and those hormones, right? And you were talking about the microbiome, and I had written a class this last year working with what I'm calling the guardian element of fascia and the microbiome, and looking at it as like an element in TCM, right? Like looking at this is more than just bacteria. This is an organ system, right?
Yeah.
And it does so many different things in the body that if we don't think about it as an organ system, we kind of miss stuff. Um, you may have heard, I mean, I know you've heard, other people listening may have heard, if you're looking up neurotransmitters, they will say things like, oh, 95% or something like that of your serotonin is manufactured in your guts, not in your brain. And I know when I read that the first time, I was like, what are my guts doing with all this serotonin? That's what I wanted to know.
Mhm.
And in your guts, it regulates peristalsis. So serotonin allows for smooth muscle contractions. Now, neurotransmitters in our guts are not the same as neurotransmitters in our brain, but because of the way the enteric nervous system is constantly talking, your gut brain is talking to your brain, right? It's like, is the messaging everything is all good? There's lots of serotonin, everything's moving, everything's all good, we're making all our neurotransmitters, or is the messaging like, guys, there is something wrong down here, help? Um, which then does throw off our neurotransmitters. So it seems kind of weird to say, oh, like your serotonin, melatonin balances and things can be thrown off by your gut microbiome and the way that it's producing those neurotransmitters. But it's kind of true. Um, so I'm also looking at factors like that, like what is the microbiome state? How are the neurotransmitters being manufactured at this time? Um, yeah, so we're looking at diet, we're looking at lifestyle, we're looking at bacterial composition. The other one, if you want to take this to like a body clock kind of place, if we are looking at TCM, we have this concept that every 2 hour period in a 24-hour cycle is being run by a meridian. And so there's always a time when each meridian is sort of at its peak power. And it depends on the person, the time period. So liver is 1 to 3 a.m., lung is 3 to 5 a.m. And depending on where in that space you're having your wake up, I understand a lot about what's going on for your body, right?
Mhm.
When we're talking about lungs, I mean, like, yes, that is breath and all of that, but that's also grief. That's also clarity. Like there's a lot of things that are sort of happening in that time and that have to do with that meridian and that element when we look at the energetic physiology of lung. So not just the physical characteristics, but all of that other stuff. This is your metal element, which is your protector, right? And because I've been working a lot with archetypes and that sort of thing in the last couple of years, when we're going into that perimenopause kind of state, that's our queen archetype, and that is related to the metal. And it is about like being in a place in your life where you're not really looking to increase. Like if you look at the TCM stuff, metal is about decrease, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's about polishing. Like metal is about refinement, right? I'm not acquiring anymore right now. I'm making my things perfect. I'm making everything shiny. I'm refining myself and my surroundings. And I know that this is going tangenty a bit, but it's like when we're in that stage of life, those factors, they show up at 3 to 5 a.m. when our lung meridian is running the show. So another question that I ask people is like, why are you waking up? Like, are you waking up because you have to pee? In which case, it might be something simple that we can work with like hypothalamus and antidiuretic hormone and those sorts of things. Or are you waking up with your brain going? And a lot of perimenopausal women, it's like I wake up at that time and I'm emotionally invested in this problem as I'm waking up. And it's like, okay, maybe we need to look at that energetic physiology at that moment. Whereas if you're waking up more 1 to 3 a.m., and often that's when I hear people saying that they're waking up with hot flashes and night sweats, right? And I'm like, okay, so this is your liver trying to metabolize your estrogens. And that's a whole different thing. Um, in which case, maybe we're looking at things to support your liver and to balance out estrogen progesterone. That takes us again back to cortisol. Like there's all of those kind of connections there. So yeah, depending on when and then we can start to play with why, and bring in those other aspects. It's funny for me, I'm sleeping better than I ever have in my life. And that's a really weird thing because I know that this is like a big complaint at this age, but I used to be a raving insomniac and now I'm actually like sleeping much more soundly. But I think partly it's because I've given myself permission to be perimenopausal now.
I
Uh,
love that.
do you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think a few years ago, I was still kind of doing this whole, like, well, it's just got to get done. So we're going to get it done. And it doesn't matter if it's late and it doesn't matter. I said I was going to do it. So we're going to get this finished right now and, dealing with everybody else's stuff. And now I'm at this point where I'm just like, it's bedtime. I'm going to go read a book. I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah.
Nothing is so crucial that it can't wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's like a whole
I
different
love
thing.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always been a really good sleeper, and now it's like all my ducks need to be in a row for me to get a good night's sleep. And there's rules in my house of the conversations we're allowed to have after a certain point, the amount of light that's allowed to be on. My husband, when we built this house, put dimmer switches on everything, and I thought that was a bit excessive when he did it, and it's my favorite thing. I can go into the bathroom and just have this little bit of light. It's wonderful. But what you said about the metal element and like waking up emotionally invested in what's going on, that was so brilliant, because I've noticed that whatever I'm waking up thinking about, if I don't deal with it the next day, I don't sleep again the next night. And so it's like I get to, if I'm going through a phase where I'm going through one right now, and it's like, oh, I still haven't finished dealing with this yet. Like, oh, here's the next part of what I have to do to get through this. And it's like, if I don't do that, I will continue every night to be woken up, hey, ruminating on that thing. And it's like, oh, I loved your way of pulling that together. I don't look at things necessarily through TCM and that like metal shiny. That was really brilliant. I like that a lot.
I'm really having fun with working with the archetypes in this last little while because it's very empowering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yes, there is a lot going on at this time of life. And yeah, that can feel kind of overwhelming, or it can feel like your body's falling apart or whatever. But there's also this is also this time of like stepping into your power, right? And having this position of wisdom and authority. And can we kind of embrace that? And what I'm finding is that I'm not making I'm not making excuses. I'm not equivocating so much anymore. Like if someone asks me to do something and I don't feel like I have the capacity for it, I feel like I'm getting better at just being like, no. And then not explaining why. It's enough. Like the Canadian in me wants to just be like, I'm so sorry, and then give you 14 reasons why I can't do that today. And I'm working really hard at just being like, no, because
Yeah.
that's not what's happening today, right?
Yeah, I'm in the same place. It's hard, but because my brain keeps like, no, no, you need to explain yourself. I'm like, no, I don't. Let's not do that.
We don't need to explain it. It's okay.
Mhm.
And not being rude, not being unkind, but being honest. And being honest with myself about what I am capable of and being honest with you. So you're not expecting something of me that is not fair,
Mhm.
right? Uh yeah, there's so much interesting stuff happening in this space around like just stepping into that and setting up boundaries and being in your power.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it's been a big thing to talk to women about that and kind of coach women through that to some extent, because for a lot of them, there's a big shift in coming out of a phase in life where you feel like maybe your big role is to be in service to others, right? Whether that's the partner or the kids or the company or whatever. Um, and then there's an internal focus that starts to happen, I think, at this point,
Mhm.
where I'm still here for the partner and the kids and the company, but I'm also here, and it's different.
It's a big deal, and that's what I think the body gets intolerant of, is these old patterns of putting yourself aside. And that a lot of the physical symptoms I see from people have are connected to that overgiving, overdoing. One of my favorite parts of the menstrual cycle is whatever comes up when you're PMSing is often what you need to deal with. Maybe not in that moment, but like those are all real things. But what in perimenopause, that time gets larger, and in menopause, you just are living hormonally in that place, and it's like it's the time to like not give any shits. It's the time to just say like, you know what, I am here and this is what I need. And it's a very hard lesson and we have time to learn it, but it's a big deal. And the faster or the more we embrace what you were saying about like bringing yourself into the mix is it's easier. I have the privilege of being child free, so I've had space to do this. Whereas wonderful as a mom of three, like you're also showing your daughter and also showing the men in your life of like, okay, this is me taking care of me.
Yeah. It's actually it's really cute watching Jorah right now, because he came to the conclusion by himself that when a woman is on her period, somebody should make her pancakes and let her sit and like relax while someone makes her pancakes. I don't know why that's the thing that is stuck in his brain, but
Best thing ever.
right, like when he realizes that that's what's happening for me or for his sister, he's just like, well, I guess I'd better make pancakes. And it's just this very sweet, pure, like, okay, I'm gonna take care of you. And here's a way I can take care of you kind of thing. Very cute.
Oh, that is the sweetest thing ever.
I'm
I
hoping
love
it
that.
I'm hoping it serves someone well in the future, you know?
Yeah. Or even he
Uh,
shares it with his other friends too, and it becomes more and more of a thing.
So I'm feeling like we should probably wrap this up soon here,
Mhm.
but I wanted to just ask, um, because we've been talking about a lot of different sides and angles to this. If you were going to give sort of some blanket advice nutritionally to women who are starting to notice their hormones shifting and that sort of thing, um, obviously we both work with like tailored approaches, one-on-one approaches with people, but there are also some general rules that would be helpful for people to
Yeah.
apply. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I usually give like there's three things that you can do to lower your cortisol or balance your cortisol is the better word for it. That doesn't involve just not being stressed, because I don't think that's useful advice of like you just have to not be stressed. It's like, well, it's a lot of that's out of your control, but there's three things that are in your control that aren't very hard that can make a big difference in how you feel. Eating regularly. And so that's every 4 hours or so, 4 to 5 hours, no fasting overnight. So like a 12 to 14 hour fast overnight is okay. Anything longer is stressful. And I usually let people, especially if they're not used to eating regularly, it's like, don't worry about the quality of the food at first. Just get food in your gullet, like just get food in your body, because that alone will lower your stress and bring your energy up. So then you can actually focus on more nutrient dense food. So eat regularly, drink water, because dehydration is a stressor. And that alone, like for me, there's a direct correlation between not drinking enough water and not sleeping at night. So it's like, that's a big deal. And make sure you're eating starchy carbs, high fiber, whole food starchy carbs at every meal. And if you just add those three, that can make a massive difference. What about you? What are some of yours?
Oh, sleep hygiene. Like
Yeah,
set up those little rituals for yourself, whatever that little ritual looks like, right? Like, um, but that I believe in the importance of ritual. And again, just sort of looking at this TCM thing and where you are in your life at this point, ritual starts to become very important. So yeah, it's like these are the things that I do before bed, and you're sort of training your brain and your body like, oh, I'm washing my face and I'm putting on my cream and I'm sitting in with my book and I'm writing in my journal, and like these are the things we do before bed. And it starts to set up that hormone cascade and reset that clock, that body clock if it's been wonky. Um, Also, I'm becoming a really big advocate of finding something that you really enjoy doing and scheduling it in on a weekly basis that is
that's
not
lovely.
a thing for anybody else. So for me, in the last couple of years, it's become dance. It's not something that I do for anybody else. It's not something I'm going to do professionally. It's not something that makes me money. It's just something that I enjoy doing, and it goes in my calendar. And now that time is booked. So, because if I don't put it in the calendar, then it's like, well, if something else comes up, I'll just, oh, I've got space. I'll just put it in there. I can see another client in there. I can do whatever. Um, but it's actually just assigning that so that every week there is something in there that's like just for you, right? And I love that it's like for me it's important that it be something movement based, because my work tends to be a little more sedentary when I'm like doing sessions and when I'm teaching. You know, I when I'm teaching, I sometimes am spending a week just sort of sitting here in an office chair, right? And that's no good. So for me, it has to be something that moves me. But for somebody else, you know, if your work is much more physical, it might be something more creative or a more intellectual pursuit or something like that, as long as it's a break, right? Because there's that whole like a change is as good as a rest kind of thing. It's creating something different, which then also stimulates our own natural like dopamine and GABA and acetylcholine, like all of those neurotransmitters. Because again, I'm thinking a lot of mental clarity, right? I hear so much from people about brain fog and memory issues and things like that as we hit a certain age. And it's like I want to keep my brain working. And the number one thing that they say promotes neuroepigenesis, like the promotion of new neurons, is fascination. When we get super interested in something, whatever it is, our hormones tell our brain, oh, this is important. We start creating new neural nets, everything starts wiring different, right? So yeah, whatever is interesting for you right now, like go for it, because that's what's going to keep our brain young, which is going to keep the chemistry working, which is going to keep your body working. So those are my things right now, on top of the adrenal stuff that I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
I love those. Those are really great ideas. Yeah. I love the bedtime ritual specifically. Like that's like it's such a simple thing, but it's so effective. But to call it a ritual, it's not like a task anymore. It's like, no, this is my bedtime ritual.
We do it for children. I was thinking about that, right? Like you know that it's hard to put a toddler to bed, so you have a whole little thing where it's like it's tub time and then it's story time and then you get tucked in with a song. And it's like, at what point do we stop thinking that I need tub time and story time? But it's like I need those things. This brain needs
Yeah.
those things so much more than a toddler's does in order to calm itself down, right? So yeah, just giving myself that same space that I would give to a little kid, and I think it helps immensely.
I love that. That's the best.
Okay, I have really enjoyed this conversation. We should do this more often, I think. Um,
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
okay. Well, I'm going to, when we post this, put some contact information for you down below so that people are able to find you, find your book,
Great.
work with you if they are interested. Anything that you want to say to anybody who might want to find you? Um,
If you go to undieting.ca, you can find my website. I also give away my cravings chapter of my book. My book is, I don't even have one to show you. Oh, here it is. This is my book. And I give away the cravings chapter. If you want to join my email list, you can also get my cravings chapter. And yeah, undieting.ca would be the easiest way to get to me.
Amazing. Thank you so much.